With that, Senator Hunt, you may open on LB 231.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm Senator Megan Hunt, MEGAN-HUNT, and I represent District 8 in Midtown Omaha, which includes the neighborhoods of Dundee and Benson. LB 231 is a bill to prohibit medical professionals from conducting conversion therapy on minors. Conversion therapy refers to interventions meant to alter an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. Contemporary science now recognizes that being LGBTQ is part of the natural spectrum of human identity. In recent decades, society has evolved to accept the rights and humanity of LGBTQ people. Gay people can get married, gay people can adopt, and many policy changes have been made to help ensure that LGBTQ people do not suffer discrimination as rampantly as they once did. However, remnants of hateful ideas about gay people, such as the practice of conversion therapy, still need to be addressed. Conversion therapy, sometimes called reparative therapy, if you recall last time I introduced this, Senator Chambers called it perversion therapy, and that stayed with me too, is a practice that seeks to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. The therapy employs a variety of shaming, emotionally traumatic, or physically painful stimuli to make their victims associate those stimuli with their LGBTQ identities. It is practiced by some licensed professionals in the context of providing health care, as well as by clergy or other spiritual advisors in the context of religious-based views. Techniques have included institutionalization, castration, forced sexual interactions, lobotomization, electroconvulsive shock therapy, and talk therapy. Regardless of the medium, whether you're castrating somebody or giving them electroshocks while showing them gay pornography, or whether you're doing talk therapy that reinforces hateful ideas about the self-loathing you want these people to feel so they will change who they are. These treatments have proven to be harmful, and they've proven to be ineffective. They don't work. We've seen in the last 5 years, if you do a little Google search, all over the country and all over the world, people who used to engage in conversion therapy, who used to run these camps, who used to run these practices, many of them have come out as gay themselves, or bi or trans, and apologized for the harm that they've caused. And this just goes to speak to the root of so many of these treatments, which are really rooted in the self-loathing and the shame that is taught to us culturally, by a culture that sees homosexuality or anything other than heterosexuality as an illness to be treated. A growing body of research overwhelmingly demonstrates that conversion therapy is not rooted in medically sound practices, is unethical, and causes substantial harm, especially to adolescents. That's why all of the national standard-setting organizations for the major health and mental health professions have come out against conversion therapy as against their ethical standards. The National Associations for Psychology, Pediatrics, School Counselors, Physicians, Psychiatrists, Nurses, Social Workers, and many others. I am handing out a list of organizations that oppose this therapy along with some quotes from them about why. And I hope you take a look at it because I want to make sure that on the floor, a lot of times on other bills we'll say, well, the American Medical Association says that this is the standard of care for this and that, and the Psychological Association says that this is what we need to be doing for students. Well, then this is exactly the kind of thing that we should be supporting because the American Medical Association, the psychiatrists, the school counselors, the nurses, every reputable medical organization says that we need to stop doing conversion therapy. Those who have gone through conversion therapy, they talk about the medically unsound methods employed by these therapists and organizations, such as behavioral therapy, electrical shock therapy, chemical aversive therapy, drug and hormone therapy, surgery, and psychotherapy. These treatments include homophobic counseling, isolation, unnecessary medication, including hormone treatment, subliminal therapies designed to enforce feminine or masculine behavior, and desensitization therapies that teach young people to associate homosexual feelings with disgusting images. These forms of treatment frequently result in nervous breakdowns, in feelings of guilt, in depression and anxiety. Name the negative consequence. This is associated with conversion therapy. Some patients have witnessed other people in their programs die by suicide or mutilate themselves. Many reparative therapy tactics are likely to cause just really, really bad distress in otherwise healthy people who never should have had to go through this. Since I introduced this bill in 2019, opponents have raised concerns about the constitutionality of this bill in terms of free speech and religious freedom. I've worked with advocates and legal experts to make updates to the bill that will address any potential court challenges while keeping our youth safe. Changes from the bill that I introduced in 2019, since most of you were here then, I'll talk about some of those. First, this bill limits the credentialed professionals that are prohibited from administering conversion therapy. The previous version included any professional holding a license under the Uniform Credentialing Act. This version limits the application of the ban to a targeted selection of relevant credentialed professionals. So that would be those regulated by the Medicine and Surgery Practice Act, the Mental Health Practice Act, the Nurse Practice Act, the Pharmacy Practice Act, and the Psychology Practice Act. So if you're like a plumber or an electrician, like you don't really have to worry about being losing your license over this or something. This bill also includes safe harbor language that explains what conversion therapy is not. This language demonstrates that so long as a credentialed professional is not seeking to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, this bill does not restrict their practice. It also removes language prohibiting the advertising of conversion therapy due to First Amendment concerns. It prohibits state funds from being used for conversion therapy or state funds from being provided to organizations that conduct conversion therapy. It also adds an exception for treatment conducted by a clergy member or a religious counselor who's acting in a religious capacity and not in the capacity of a healthcare professional. So nothing in LB231 prevents faith leaders from practicing what they believe regarding gender issues or LGBTQ people, nor will it criminalize speech based on religious viewpoints. So it's not preventing a pastor or anybody from saying what they want to say in church. It's not the intent of the bill. The language of this bill was carefully crafted with the advice of many attorneys who specialize in civil liberties and First Amendment issues to ensure that no freedom of religious or freedom of speech issues would occur. Similar pieces of legislation from other states have been upheld in federal appeals courts over the last few years, as courts recognize that the state and local governments have the authority to protect youth from the serious harms caused by conversion therapy. There is no evidence that shows that gender identity or sexual orientation can be treated or cured. Regardless of your personal views about morality of homosexuality or non-traditionally conforming gender identities, there is no science backing this practice up. Under LB231, we're saying that those credentialed medical professions that would typically conduct conversion therapy cannot do it on minors, with an exception for clergy members. You will hear personal testimony today from people who have experienced detrimental effects from conversion therapy, especially as children. One person I met through the previous bill I introduced who became a friend can't be here today, but you may remember his story from 2019. He went through conversion therapy treatments and he received electroshock treatments here in Nebraska. And he had a seizure and he bit off part of his tongue and woke up with his mouth full of blood. And this was because of a pseudoscientific treatment that was meant to prevent him from being gay, to turn him straight. And he has dealt with the trauma and scars physically and mentally from that treatment, and he will have them for the rest of his life. And we have the opportunity to do something here to make sure that no more children are subjected to that kind of treatment. Conservative legislatures all over the country have passed this legislation, including most recently Utah, with the support of the Mormon Church. So I know my reputation as like the flaming gay liberal or whatever, but like this is a policy that is really about human rights, and it's about children's rights, and it's about making sure that we're protecting the most vulnerable people in Nebraska. And it's something that, regardless of your religious belief, is something on a moral basis that I think we can come to some agreement on. Whether we accept the LGBTQ community or not, as the government responsible for licensing and standard setting for our medical practitioners, we're doing our constituents a great disservice by allowing this debunked pseudoscience to be offered under the guise of medical treatment. Being LGBTQ is not an abnormality. It's not something to be treated or fixed. 20 states have passed this legislation banning this harmful practice, not including 20 states and the District of Columbia. 9 of them have been signed into law by Republican governors. When I first introduced this bill, I think we were at 14 or 15 states had passed it. I was really hoping Nebraska would be the 15th. Now we could be the 21st. But that just shows you how many people across the country are seeing this as an important issue today, in large part because of the testifiers, because of the people who are brave enough to come and say, this is what I went through and experienced, and I don't want anybody else to have to feel this. Just this week, of course, the Lincoln City Council made history as the first city in Nebraska to ban conversion therapy, and I would really like us to build on that momentum. More people in Nebraska are becoming educated about what conversion therapy is, and I think that we can build on that momentum and get it passed at the state level. Year after year, members of the LGBTQ community reach out to me and tell me that this is a really high priority for them. I met with a group of kids from Project Everlast, which is a nonprofit that works with homeless and formerly homeless youth, especially ones that are LGBTQ. And they made me the most beautiful poster that was, it was really sweet. One side of it was like derogatory names that they had been called, that all the kids had been called, like, gay slurs and stuff like that, and it was like very dark. And then the other side was how they see themselves, and it was, all the words of pride and of confidence and love and all of the things that I want our LGBTQ youth to feel deep inside, that they're valued, that they're welcome, that they're born perfect the way they are. And meeting with those kids and hearing their stories about conversion therapy, many of them homeless because their families kicked them out because they weren't straight. These are our neighbors. These are people in Nebraska. And these are also folks that the state ends up taking up a responsibility for when they become wards of the state, or when they get into other trouble, or they become dependent on state services because they were abandoned by those who are supposed to support them. I urge you to make a decision informed by the mounting evidence against conversion therapy as the inhumane practice that it is, and move this bill forward. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I don't see any. Thanks, Senator Hunt, for introducing LB231. Let us next take up proponent testimony. Welcome.
Hello, members of the committee. Thank you for, my name is Vincent Litwinowitz, Litwinowicz, and I might ask for a little more time here because of my cognitive issues. I generally like to talk, I like to talk in general personalized ways about topics like this. I guess we're never going to have a utopia where we can all get along. And anyway, I forgot what I was going to say. But I guess I should really introduce myself, because some people, I know I've come here before and had communication issues, is that in 1995, I had to leave my grad school. I was working for an internationally well-known professor in his field due to bipolar I depression. But based upon that recommendation, and without 11 years of being out of my field, or any field of engineering, I walked into a professor's office here in UNL and got a funded doctoral position. So I just want, sometimes people have a misconception of people in wheelchairs, and I just thought I'll never have to say this again, maybe for a few more years. I'm just going to read I just want to say one thing with regard to conversion therapy. Along with my brother, who was gay and tried going straight when he married a woman he loved many years earlier in his life and is now happily married to his male partner for many years, I think it would be ridiculous and impossible to convert my feelings of a female gender identity. From my feelings deep inside me, I don't know of any drug, stick, voodoo, or talking to that could possibly change my disposition of a female gender identity. Even though I don't know what it's like to be a biological woman, I firmly, finally, and completely believe I am a woman on the inside. At least I am much more woman than man, believing that we are all on a spectrum in many ways. Most of us are just genetically clumped to one side or the other, and some of us are not. I know I feel better with my new identification and publicly acknowledging this fact. I know it will and has made me feel far more happy, peaceful, and genuine on the inside. That is all I need to know. I am certain of this, and I wouldn't want to be converted anyway, because I would like to be the me that God, if he exists and is not an idiot savant, created on the inside. I don't know, but I think we were also perhaps scattered from the Tower of Babel as well, to use a Christian analogy. And our mission is for all of us to love each other and get along. It's just more complicated. It's just a more complicated story than we think. Why wouldn't a loving God give us this challenge as well in the genetic creation of all the people who identify themselves as who they are and how they genuinely feel on the inside? Are we up to the challenge of getting along? Please vote for this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. Are there any questions?
I do not see any questions, but thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thank you. I spoke first. I'm very exhausted. Thank you.
That's fine. That's fine. Next proponent. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Senator Lathrop and senators of the Judiciary Committee for the opportunity to provide testimony today. My name is Abby Swatsworth, A-B-B-I-S as in Sam, W-A-T-S-W-O-R-T-H. I'm the Executive Director of Out Nebraska, an organization working to celebrate and empower LGBTQ Nebraskans. Out Nebraska stands in support of LB231. It is time to add Nebraska to the growing list of states that have banned conversion therapy. We believe Nebraskans want our young people to be safe and to have every opportunity to thrive in our great state. From a collaborative report by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration and the American Psychological Association, sexuality occurs across a continuum. Same-gender attraction and relationships are normal variations of human sexuality. Sexual minority adolescents face the same developmental tasks that accompany adolescence for all youth, including sexual orientation identity development. Gender development begins in infancy and continues progressively throughout childhood. Gender diversity may emerge as early as a child's preschool years or as late as adolescence. Many gender minority children will develop a cisgender identity in adolescence or adulthood. A majority of these will identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual in adulthood. Other gender minority children will experience worsening gender dysphoria with the physical changes of adolescence. These youth generally identify as transgender in adolescence and adulthood. Conversion practices aimed at a fixed outcome, such as gender conformity or heterosexual orientation, including those aimed at changing gender identity and expression and sexual orientation, are coercive, harmful, and should not be part of behavioral health treatment. End of report. As a member of the LGBT community, I understand personally the danger of believing that some part of your identity is bad. While I am not a survivor of conversion therapy, I did grow up in a church that regularly preached that AIDS was God's punishment for being gay and that all gays were going to hell. I absorbed these messages and struggled with depression and substance misuse until I received affirming therapy in young adulthood and began the process of accepting myself, eventually coming to believe that I have inherent worth as a queer woman. This legislation will not impact parental or religious rights. Parents and churches retain the right to reject the science of sexuality and gender over their interpretation of biblical teachings. This legislation will curb licensed professionals from using damaging practices shown through research to produce serious, life-threatening harm for young people who are subjected to them. Out Nebraska believes that Nebraska should value and honor the lives of all our young people. Doing so means protecting them from conversion therapy. We respectfully encourage you to declare that young Nebraskans are born perfect by advancing 231 to general file. And I can take questions.
Okay. I don't see any questions this evening.
Thank you.
But thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Other proponent testimony. Okay, he needs a copy. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Thank you, Senators, thank you, Megan Hunt. I also want to thank Abby Swapsworth and Matthew Shurka from Born Perfect. My name is Aaron Opperly, AARON, I'm here to testify and explain the mental trauma of conversion therapy and collapse of my faith that I experienced shortly after I had come out to my family in the mid-90s. In 1995 and also in 1998, I had attended a residential conversion therapy ministry called Love in Action. They had staged a mock funeral for me because I had an affair with a man. Instead of kicking me out of the program, which is what I wanted, they staged this funeral to teach me a lesson against my destructive behaviors. Clients in the program had to approach me while I laid on a table with my eyes closed to express their feelings of disgust, anger, abandonment, sadness, you name it, for what I had done. They were basically eulogies. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how that time in my life has affected me now. The key words in that previous sentence being, I'm here. Trust me, I know of a few friends when I was in that program who took their own lives. The effects of that funeral have left permanent scars on my life today and others who witnessed that horrific exercise years ago. Very recently, I have just begun piecing together what a higher power means for me. Since my experience with Love in Action, I have been agnostic with a tendency towards atheism. However, recently I've realized that hasn't helped me much. I still struggle with the same behaviors leaving me empty that I did 20 plus years ago. I'm currently seeing a clinical hypnotist to help me get in touch with my inner child, a part of my life way before God was tainted by people. A time before puberty. It's sad for me to still believe that the best years of my life were in grade school and that I won't have any better years in the future. Love in Action told me that if I left the program, I would surely die, and that if I joined a gay-affirming church, I would be creating my own X-brand of religion to gain the respect, approval, and love of God. Please think about that for a moment. Just by default, that statement strips any hope of a relationship with God to ever happen, so long as I stay gay. Presently, I'm really trying to ignore these voices of the past. How my life might have been different if I was told growing up, God loves me and he could care less if I'm gay. I can have a relationship with him and it can be correct without bias. It's sad that I don't trust anyone to lead me to God ever again, but I will tell you this. I'm still hopeful. Hopeful that someday again I will hear his voice like I did when I was a kid. To regain that innocence again and feel a love I've never felt before. To hope for a future where the love of God can be taught to LGBTQ plus youth without limitations of God's acceptance of who we are. I have to believe that. I must believe that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Opperly. Is that you hold your hand up?
Yep.
Okay, Senator Moorfield.
Mr. Opperly, I just want to thank you for coming out today, and yeah, on behalf of Senator Hunt and I, and your story is very compelling, so thank you.
Oh, hang on a minute. I got a question from Senator Bansing Brooks.
Sure.
This is an imperfect system. There's a little time lag between the video and the questions. Senator Bansing Brooks says, "Thank you, Mr. Opperly, for coming out and taking time off work to tell your cruel, tragic story once again. You are brave, strong, and a role model for many Nebraskans. Thank you."
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Geisler.
That's fine. I appreciate your testimony. And very personally, I just want to tell you the God I serve does love you.
Thanks. Still trying to figure that out for myself.
Yeah, I encourage you to keep on that journey.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Thanks, Mr. Opperly.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Committee chair and committee members, thank you. My name is Matthew Shurka. I am a conversion therapy survivor representing myself. I'm also the co-founder of a national organization called Born Perfect, which was, as myself, created by survivors of conversion therapy. We have worked nationwide with elected officials to introduce legislation that would specifically protect minors from such practices by licensed professionals. And we have a network now of thousands of survivors who've joined our organization from all across the country, including here in Nebraska. Just to share a little bit about my own story, at the age of 16, I had come out to my father, and he was very loving and very caring and told me that, whatever support I needed, he would be by my side. And in his search for a therapist, for someone for me to talk to, my father had never heard of the term conversion therapy or the other terms that exist out there, such as reparative therapy or reintegrative therapy. My father was promised that I had the opportunity of becoming heterosexual or straight because anything LGBTQ is caused from childhood traumas and it is a psychological condition, and that there really is no such thing as homosexuality as it was explained to him. And so my father, in his care for me, saw this as an opportunity that he could, not live what he thought was a horrible life. And what he was told by the therapist, I would face all of these uphill battles, such as suicide, depression, what would happen to my career and our family as a whole. And so at age 16, I was placed in conversion therapy by a licensed professional. And I was diagnosed on the basis of how sexually experienced I was. Given that I was inexperienced as a 16-year-old, they had promised my parents that I would start to see my heterosexuality come back within 6 weeks. And a lot of the techniques they used, I just wanted to add the fact that I was in it for 5 years, and so that never came to fruition, what they promised my parents in the first place, which, was at their own cost. I was instructed to not only spend time with other male peers so that I understood masculinity and who I was as a male, and I had to avoid female peers, including my mom and my sisters, and they thought a cause of my homosexuality was being too close to them. And so I wasn't allowed to speak to my mom and my two sisters for 3 years. It was my father's adamancy to me really succeeding in this therapy, they really did everything they could. This was a devastating impact to my family and to all of us. I had rebuilt my family since then. I did contemplate suicide for 2 to 3 years, and actually had to go through the process of seeking out therapy and understanding what a therapist actually does with their patients when I left. So I just want to add on top of that, I know I don't have time, but the UCLA Williams Institute did their own research, and it shows that 700,000 people living in the United States today have gone through conversion therapy. Half of them were under the age of 18, placed by their guardians. I also want to make it clear that conversion therapy is not a mere discussion or exchange of ideas. It is a mental health treatment in which a therapist seeks to effect a specific predetermined outcome to change a child's identity from gay to straight or from transgender to non-transgender. Therapy is not a form of self-expression for therapists. It is a medical treatment, which is why every state in the country regulates it to enforce professional standards and to protect patients from harm. In addition, conversion therapists don't just talk. They direct their minor patients to take specific actions that cause serious harm, such as instructing a gay man not to talk to his mother and female siblings, as it was in the case for me, or the false belief.
Mr. Shurka.
Yeah.
I have to enforce that light.
Sorry.
Okay, no, fascinating story. I really appreciate. Where are you from, by the way?
Originally, I am from New York.
Okay. No, we appreciate the fact that you're here, but I gotta enforce.
No,
I gotta
by all
enforce
means.
time limits, just to keep it fair. Any questions for Mr. Shurka? I don't see any.
Thank you.
Sincerely, thank you for being here. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Lathrop and members of the committee. My name is Sarah Rips, S-A-R-A-R-I-P-S. I am the LGBTQIA+ Legal and Policy Counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union of Nebraska. To all the LGBTQ Nebraskans, I want to acknowledge you and affirm our commitment to fighting for your rights. Thank you, Senator Hunt, for bringing this bill, and Judiciary Committee for your time today. I'm here speaking in favor of LB231, and I will briefly note some of the most common questions and answers about legal issues regarding conversion therapy policies. Conversion therapy, as you've heard numerous times, has been disavowed by every leading medical association because it is unethical and when applied to minors can cause severe harm. Our government has an obligation to protect our youth from harm. The ACLU supports this measure because it aligns with best practices and it protects LGBTQ youth in Nebraska from harm. Opponents of these measures usually ground their opposition in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, free exercise of religion. However, it's really not that simple, and that is why courts have upheld similar measures and rejected those exact challenges. Admittedly, some courts have not, one circuit, but that's currently being challenged, so that could change and be on our side. I would draw the committee's attention to a very recent United States Supreme Court case, Nifla versus Becerra, where Supreme Court explicitly ruled that there are 2 exceptions to the strict scrutiny requirement for free speech. Commercial speech doesn't apply here, and professional conduct regulations incidentally affecting speech, including factual disclosures via informed consent mandates. What does that mean? It means that legislatures can regulate the conduct of licensed professionals related to the treatment of their patients, even if that involves regulation of speech to ensure proactive ethical measures and to ensure that patients are not at risk of harm. Conversion therapy is a form of medical treatment, albeit an unethical and disavowed one. LB231 targets the quality and type of care that licensed professionals can provide to a minor patient. This bill protects the care provider's ability to express his or her own opinion regarding conversion therapy. It does not compel providers to disclose facts with which they disagree. This bill does not limit what religious leaders and parents can say to their children. This bill does not limit providers from discussing this as a treatment option. The only thing this bill prohibits is from a therapist from actually performing conversion therapy on a minor, given the significant risk of harm. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Senator DeBoer.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here today. Who in Nebraska, do we still have these camps like they're talking about in Nebraska? Are these things still happening in Nebraska? I don't know if you...
That's a wonderful question that I do not know the answer to, but can definitely get back to you on your office regarding whether or not like those still exist.
Okay.
But right, if it would limit that in the state, but if there were ones in other states that a therapist really wanted to refer their patient to, this statute would not bar that. It just limits their ability to conduct this medical procedure.
So even if we pass this, I can still, if I'm a therapist, I can still send someone to a camp like that in some other state?
Yeah. And you have the right to discuss it with your patient, to discuss sexual orientation change efforts, but this exists, but they are not allowed to do it, to practice that form of medical care and treatment.
Okay, so not just the camps now. Are there like psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists that are performing this, I don't even want to call it a therapy, this therapy?
Yeah, and
in
this
Nebraska?
limits their ability to practice that type of medical care.
This is happening in Nebraska right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I see no other questions. Thank you. Next, proponent.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Evan, E-V-A-N, McCracken, M-C-C-R-A-C-K-E-N. I'm a doctoral candidate in psychology and law at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Nebraska Psychological Association this evening. So on behalf of the Nebraska Psychological Association, we would like to support LB231, which would prohibit healthcare professionals from practicing conversion therapy on minors in Nebraska. The American Psychological Association, in agreement with the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, American College of Physicians, American Counseling Association, American Medical Association, American School Counselor Association, American School Health Association, National Association of Social Workers, World Psychiatric Association, and the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration opposes the practice of therapies intended to change sexual orientation from gay, lesbian, or bisexual to heterosexual because such therapies are not needed. There is no credible evidence that they work, and there is a significant potential that they could cause harm to participants. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association, due to mounting research evidence that having the same gender sexual orientation is not inherently pathological, decreed that homosexuality is not a mental illness. So while gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals are actually more likely than their heterosexual peers to suffer from depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide, a significant body of research actually indicates that this is a direct cause of the discrimination that they face. And not inherently due to their sexual orientation. To further support this point, a growing body of research indicates that when communities are actually accepting and supportive of LGBT individuals, they are not more likely to experience mental health issues similar to their heterosexual counterparts. In 2009, the American Psychological Association, after conducting a comprehensive literature review, concluded that there is little evidence that therapies attempting to change sexual orientation can be successful. This is not surprising given the decades of research have suggested that sexual orientation, like your handedness, is not a characteristic that can be altered therapeutically. Our final concern is that therapies designed to change sexual orientation are likely to cause harm to the participants themselves. Being required to change one's sexual orientation communicates this aspect of the self as undesirable, which logically could lead to self-hatred, depression, and suicide, echoing some of the testimonies that you've heard behind me. In addition, such therapies often include inaccurate and very pejorative information about sexual orientation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for being here. Any questions for this testifier? I see none. Thank you. Any other proponents here to testify?
Hello.
Good evening.
My name is Judy King, Judyking, and I'm a proponent for LB231. And I want to thank Senator Hunt for bringing all these bills forward this afternoon. Every one of them has been needed. I just kind of want to share a little bit of good news about a similar bill that went through the City Council. And I walked going door to door for James Michael Bauer to get him elected. I donated funds, and I'm just so proud of him for getting that bill passed, or the ban on conversion therapy passed at the City Council after a 5-1 City Council vote on Monday. I'm just so proud of him. I'm going to read just a couple things out of a newspaper article published February 26th this year. And it said that the move bars counselors, psychiatrists, and therapists from seeking to change the sexual orientation or gender identity of a minor. Professional associations have condemned the therapy over concerns it damages the mental health of children and can lead to high coincidences of suicide. Survivors testified at that hearing about the shame, anxiety, and depression that they felt when they were subjected to the conversion therapy. City Councilman James Michael Bowers said that his ordinance would not limit the speech of religious clergy or parents to counsel the children in accord with their beliefs, and federal courts have upheld similar conversion therapy bans. Bowers, who is gay, said the testimony of conversion therapy survivors and the ordinance's passage sends a hopeful method of support to LGBTQ youth who may still be in the closet. That message saves lives, and this vote will too, Bowers said. And I am saying that the Bill 231 will save lives. And I really appreciate Senator Hunt bringing them forward, and I hope it passes.
Okay.
And I will walk door to door for anybody to get them elected.
Okay.
Doing the same thing.
Thank you, Ms. King. Anyone else here to speak as a proponent on LB 231? Anyone here to testify in opposition? Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Matt Sharp, M-A-T-T-S-H-A-R-P, and I'm Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. Who gets to decide what counseling goals a person can pursue? The patient and his or her counselor, or the government? This should be an easy answer, yet LB 231 allows government officials to insert themselves into the private conversations between patient and counselor to dictate what goals can be pursued and what ideas can be discussed. The U.S. Supreme Court has long protected the First Amendment rights of professionals, such as therapists and counselors. And in the NIFLA case, which was brought up earlier, the court questioned the constitutionality of laws in California and New York that ban certain counseling related to a person's sexual attractions or gender identity, laws similar to LB 231. Relying on that precedent, just a couple of months ago, in a case called Otto versus City of Boca Raton, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit struck down a Florida ordinance that is virtually identical to LB 231. The Florida ordinance prohibited, quote, the practice of seeking to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity, including but not limited to efforts to change behaviors, gender identity, or gender expressions, or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions or feelings towards individuals of the same gender or sex. If you look at page 6, lines 5 through 9 of LB 231, is nearly a word-for-word copy of the language that was struck down as unconstitutional in Otto versus City of Boca Raton. The 11th Circuit ruled that the Florida ordinance discriminated based on the content of the counselor's speech in violation of the First Amendment. Quote, whether therapy is prohibited depends only on the content of the words used in therapy, and the ban on that content is because the government disagrees with it. And whether the government's disagreement is for good reasons, great reasons, or terrible reasons has nothing at all to do with it. All that matters is that a therapist's speech to a minor client is legal or illegal under the ordinance based solely on its content, end quote. That was the basis for the court striking it down. If a therapist engages in abusive or unethical conduct, he can and should be disciplined. If he forces a client to undergo therapy against a client's will, he can and should be disciplined and even sued for malpractice. But the government cannot prohibit voluntary, client-directed conversations between a therapist and client solely because of its content. The 11th Circuit, going back to that case one more, warned that, quote, people have intense moral, religious, and spiritual views about counseling related to sexuality and identity. And that is exactly why the First Amendment does not allow communities to determine how their neighbors may be counseled about matters of sexual orientation and gender, end quote. Every person deserves the right to private conversations with their counselor as they choose, free from government censorship. LB 231 interferes with that right. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't see any questions for you, Mr. Shurka. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator McKinney.
Thank you. I think the nature of this bill is to protect minors who may not be able to protect themselves because it's their parents that are forcing them into conversion therapy. And I'm just wondering what's wrong with protecting minors when the parents are doing so, especially in a situation where a minor is forced in conversion therapy and is electrically shocked. Like, what's wrong with us as a legislature making sure that doesn't happen to minors?
Thank you, Senator. And first off, I would say I think we can all agree that those techniques are abusive, immoral, unethical, and should be disciplined. I think what the court in the 11th Circuit addressed was the problem with laws like this, like LB 231, is that they're not focused on those specific instances you bring up. We do have laws that prohibit child abuse and can be enforced in those situations. And we do have ethical codes of conduct. And as the 11th Circuit said, if you wanted to craft laws to target some of those practices, absolutely fine. But the problem with LB 231, which again is similar to that Florida one, is it is incredibly over-inclusive. It is broad and is going after not just the terrible practices, but the protected speech as well. And so I think that's what the 11th Circuit was focused on, was the breadth of these laws and ways that are encompassing way too much rather than being targeted towards the specific harms that you and I both agree are wrong.
What do you deem as acceptable conversion therapy practices?
Again, I would go back to what the 11th Circuit dealt with. And it said when you've got individuals going to their client, to their counselor, and it's voluntary and it's client directed, it's the client saying, I want help with that, that's what the First Amendment protects. And unfortunately, just like the law there,
how is a minor voluntarily seeking conversion therapy when it's the parents forcing them into conversion therapy? How is that voluntary?
Sure, and I, again, would go back, if this is being forced, I think even under the ethical rules, counselors are not allowed to force therapies on a client against their wishes. But I think what the 11th Circuit was dealing with was that they actually had a counselor who had clients that were coming voluntarily, that they were seeking this out because of their religious convictions or other reasons, and that the court was saying you can't have these broad laws that infringe upon those protected aspects.
So is it a good practice to stage a funeral for a minor to get them to say they're not gay anymore?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that, Senator. I apologize.
So do you think it's a good practice to stage a funeral for a minor to get them to say they're not gay anymore? You think that's a good practice?
No, I think we can all agree that that's terrible. But the problem with LB231 is that it's not targeted towards those things. Its breadth encompasses a lot of protected activity, as the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals found.
I'm just curious if you could. I'm just wondering what's a good practice, because I think it's all horrible. But thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next opponent. Welcome back.
Good evening. We've gone from good afternoon to good evening. Chairman Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. Once again, my name is Karen Bowling, Karenbowling, and I serve as the Executive Director at Nebraska Family Alliance and testify on their behalf. We agree that everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. No one should receive shock treatment, funerals, castration, none of that. That's all terrible. We can also agree that clients should be in the driver's seat and have the freedom to self-direct their own counseling and goals free from coercion, use of force, or viewpoint discrimination. Professional regulations prohibit abusive and coercive therapy, but LB 231 uses broad language in Section 4A1 to encompass any sort of counseling, including basic talk therapy. All individuals and families should be free to choose those forms of counseling and personal therapy that are in harmony with their moral convictions and life goals. Children, parents, and their counselor should be able to talk freely about the issues the child is experiencing and determine what counseling goals are best for the child's mental, emotional, and physical health. Given the widespread debate over the best course of treatment for children experiencing gender dysphoria, both minors and parents benefit from having access to a full spectrum of available counseling. Let's make an example. A 16-year-old girl seeks counsel from her pastor because she's experienced confusion over her gender identity and concerned about the unknown health impact of hormone therapy and surgery. She has decided that she wants to embrace her God-given biological sex. Her pastor and parents believe because of the complexity, she would benefit talking to a licensed mental health provider. Under LB 231, the pastor maybe is protected. However, the counselor would be prohibited and actually found illegal to counsel the young girl to identify with her biological sex. Such counseling should be protected and not censored. Forcing only one form of counseling is viewpoint discrimination and infringement of professional speech, as noted in Ifla Becerra, and may not be in the best interest of the minor. The essence of religion is the concept that human persons can experience change. Public policy should protect the right of individuals to practice their faith and not undermine it. In closing, I ask that the committee members ensure that Nebraska families and individuals be free to choose the forms of counseling and personal therapy that are in harmony with their moral convictions and their life goals and not interfere with the counselor and self-directed goals of the patient. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowling. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, committee chairman. My name is Angie Klein. I'm from Bellevue, Nebraska, and I'm here in opposition of LB231.
Spell your last name for us.
K-L-E-I-N. It's tricky.
Say it again.
K-L-E-I-N. Over 20 years ago, I got to make a decision to leave a homosexual lifestyle. During my 6 years of being a homosexual, I came to a point in my journey that I desired to change. I desired to seek freedom from same-sex attractions and then began my journey of inner healing. I explored this road to healing with help from professional counselors and pastoral caregivers. In these experiences, I was never forced, I was never pressured, I was never shamed, and I was never abused in any way. Each individual honored and loved me where I was at, and I was given the power of choice and the dignity to think for myself about the issue I was struggling with. Why take that away from an individual? They should be allowed to have their own individual counseling goals, and so do families. In my choosing to live as a heterosexual woman, I have in no way felt repressed or unfulfilled sexually. In fact, just the opposite. I've been happily married for over 7 years, and I am a proud mother of 2 children, none of which would have been possible if I did not have the freedom to choose my own counseling objectives or if I was denied valuable resources. Furthermore, as a pastor, over the last 15 years, I have worked with many individuals and young people who were questioning their sexual orientation or gender identity, who were like me, wanting to bring their sexual orientation or gender confusion into agreement with their faith. These individuals were given the same love, honor, and dignity afforded me, the power of choice, and the dignity to think for themselves. I still work with many individuals who are coming out of sexual confusion, sexual abuse, and sexual trauma. I now know how important it is to make sure the individual is in charge of his or her own counseling goals. Please do not take away the yes or the no of individuals. The radical ideology and radical agenda that is consuming our country in regards to this is redefining the very fabric of this great country and our great state of Nebraska. There's no other health topic that a qualified health care provider is not allowed to talk about. Why this one and why now? I know many who have left the homosexual lifestyle and many who are transgender and are not anymore. My ex-trans friends are sterile for life because of the affirmation therapy they received and the puberty blockers they were given for transitioning. We need to press hold on this type of therapy because individuals are damaged for a lifetime because of a decision that a therapist affirmed in their office instead of exploring other options with the individual. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Klein? I see none. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
You waited a long time to testify.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. Anyone else here to testify in opposition?
Hi, my name is Gwen Easter, Gweneaster, and I wanted to say, first of all, that to the gentleman back there, that God loves him. God loves all of us. He hates our sin. Homosexuality, fornication, adultery, all of those are sins to God. No, and we all fall short to the glory of God. First off, so I want him to know that God does love him, and God looks up on the heart. So I want him to understand that. I wanted to also say, pertaining to this bill, that I think that it should be left up to parents and their child to decide what is best for them. The government, I feel like, needs to stay out of family affairs. I also feel that we can look at this on both sides equally. I don't want to see anyone abusing children under this. You talk about the conversion. Some of the things he said, like this gentleman said, they should be held accountable if they're doing certain things. But it's to be left up to those families. I also want to say that we can equally say that it's abusive for 2, 3, and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds being put in a position pertaining to this lifestyle to confuse them. To me, that's abuse. To push a lifestyle when people do have a choice. The chromosomes X, X, Y, and Y, it tells us, boy, girl, I look at a lot of videos on YouTube, and I was telling God how I wanted to understand some things, because I don't want to hurt people, and I wanted to get an understanding. And I listened to some of the people, kids and adults, and they talked about this homosexuality, and I was very disturbed by a parent saying like 2 and 3-year-olds, wanted to be a boy when they were a girl and things like that. As a daycare provider, I've been working with kids since I was 16. I never, ever have had a kid that didn't want to play with a toy, a girl wanted to play with a truck or a boy toy, or, vice versa. But I've never had a child say they want to not be a boy or a girl. These are things that are being planted in kids. And science, there's no science to say that people were born gay. As a Christian and people who stand by the word of God, God said he made man and woman. That's it. That's it. And if you believe in the word of God, then you have to believe what he said. And Jesus died for all of our sins, and if we repent, he will forgive us. I just want everybody to know that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Easter. Welcome back.
Good evening, Chairman Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Tom Benzer, T-O-M-V-E-N-Z-O-R. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Catholic Conference, here to express our opposition to LB231. The Catholic faith recognizes the supreme dignity of each and every person. Each of us is made in the image and likeness of God, and the only appropriate response to this fundamental fact is charity, which is to will the good of the other. Charity extends to every aspect of our lives, including the ways we counsel and assist others in their life's journey. LB231 attempts to address conversion therapy, which has been utilized in counseling situations. As defined by LB231, conversion therapy would include not only problematic practices, but also include a number of benign practices. The task before us is to make critical distinctions between these two things. This committee has heard numerous heartbreaking stories this year and 2 years ago when LB167 was considered. It seems universally acknowledged that the problematic practices of conversion therapy are unhelpful, unsafe, and unethical. Professional licensing bodies can already discipline a licensed professional for engaging in these inappropriate techniques. LB231, however, is not simply restricted to harmful practices of conversion therapy. It also includes practices such as talk therapy, and this therapeutic technique helps clients choose their counseling goals through the ability to explore the issues they are presenting. Consider the following example, which would be captured by LB231's problematic definition of conversion therapy. An 18-year-old male experiences sexual or romantic attractions for somebody of the same sex. He considers these unwanted and undesired attractions. Rather than act on these attractions, he would prefer to live chastity by integrating his human sexuality with his moral or religious convictions. LB231 would prohibit a counselor from helping him realize his counseling goals. To provide contrast, if the attraction were to somebody of the opposite sex, the same 18-year-old could seek such assistance without any issue. This unequal treatment raises serious constitutional problems for LB231, as you've already heard. LB231 also purports to provide some sort of, it seems like, a religious accommodation. Besides being practically meaningless, it ultimately proposes a false understanding of the healthcare provider and their moral or religious commitments. Section 3, subsection 3, assumes that a person can simply suspend their pastoral and religious ministry from their capacity as a healthcare professional, as if one were hanging up their coat at the beginning of the workday, only to be thrown back on when they leave the office. Certainly, counselors must suspend judgment and refrain from imposing their values onto their clients. But this subsection would force healthcare professionals who are clergy members or religious counselors, and I understand there's an amendment on that issue, to check their religious and moral values at the door. This treats pastoral and religious considerations as having no bearing on the overall well-being and health of a client or patient, and this faulty philosophical notion is especially problematic when the patient or client seeks a healthcare professional who understands and respects their moral or religious commitments. And for these reasons, we would ask you not to advance LB231, and happy to take any questions.
I don't see any questions, Mr. Benzer.
Okay.
It must be 5:45 on a Friday.
No, thank you for all your service on these late evenings.
No, thank you. Thanks for being here. Next proponent, or opponent, pardon me.
My name is Amber Parker, A-M-B-E-R, Parker, P-A-R-K-E-R. I am an opponent to LB231. Again, the governing law of the land is the Constitution of the United States of America. And we are really in a bad situation when we have to create legislation, or like Senator Hunt had created and said, well, there's a religious exemption. Because the truth is that the Constitution protects us whether we're in a government building, private sector, whatever it would be. Because worship is really the heart of the people and what they think, say, and do and act upon. With that being said, LB231, I want to make sure I'm saying the right bill here. There's been a lot of bills today. What it does, too, is it infringes upon parental rights. Now, it also highlights that in the state of Nebraska, we really do need legislation pertaining to parental rights and bringing about compelling evidence of abuse, which would be through strict scrutiny, but right now it's a rational basis. So I would like to see legislation like that in the future. But with Senator Hunt's bill, an infringement upon parental rights, the parents should be taking care of their children. And I want to address Amendment 1. We talk about freedom of speech. And then somebody already addressed here today of saying when you come up and you have basically right now, LB 231 is inserting Senator Megan Hunt into a counseling session with every single person in the state of Nebraska that would be a minor. And that's wrong. That's not the government's job. And we all should be, whatever side one would be, should be against that because that's an infringement upon the Constitution. The other thing I want to say about is, let's say you have reading material, right? And a counselor talks about that how a man or a woman, you were made in the image of God as male or female. Are we now going to, according to LB 231, is it outlawing the Holy Bible now? Because counselors can't use it based upon that it could be a conversion of minor. I want to clarify, I am not for any abuse, and I've heard some things I've never even heard today, and I'm so sorry for those who have went through it. That should have never happened. But we cannot pass LB 231 for bills that are going to hurt people and insert government in counseling sessions and with minors and take away God-fearing, loving parents that want to care for their children. And that's all I have.
I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else here to testify in opposition to LB 231? Anyone here to speak in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Hunt, you may close. I have position letters, actually 477 position letters. 44 of those are proponents and 433 are opponent position letters. We also have written testimony received earlier in the day. First, or as follows: Meg Mekalachuk with is a proponent from Planned Parenthood, North Central States. Kelsey Waldron is a proponent from Women's Fund of Omaha. Karina M. McCormick, PhD, not representing anyone but herself, is a proponent. And Adam Whitty, W-I-T-T-E, is a proponent, not representing any organization. Those are the position letters and the written testimony received earlier today. And with that, Senator Hunt, you may close.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop. I know that we affectionately call this day in Judiciary Committee Gay Day. It's the day when we kind of hear a lot of these subject matter bills around workplace non-discrimination and public accommodations and gay panic defense and conversion therapy. And thank you everybody for sticking it out and hanging in here with me. Normally we would go really late on this day. In 2019, when we first heard my first conversion therapy bill, we were in the Warner Chamber and the whole room was full and there was a line and there were cops and some guy stood up and started yelling, and it's that type of mood. And so I want to thank all the testifiers for being here to testify. And I wish we could all go out and celebrate after this, but perhaps in future years that's what we'll do. I say that to say that because of COVID-19, I don't want the fact that we didn't go until midnight today to indicate that we don't have enough support in the state to take us till midnight on this issue. In 2019, we had 24 in-person proponents, and we had over 1,000 letters of support. And this is something that comes up to me in my inbox all the time, on my social media all the time, as an issue that's very important to Nebraskans, whether you're gay, straight. When you find out about conversion therapy and you learn how it works and what it is, it's something that across the board people oppose, and they don't want it happening in Nebraska. It does happen in Nebraska. We have camps here in Nebraska, and we also have at least 12 conversion therapy therapists, providers that I know of who hold a license in Nebraska. Some of them submitted opposition testimony saying, I provide conversion therapy and I would like to keep doing that. So those people we certainly know, but we do know that there's at least 12 therapists in Nebraska that hold a license. Speaking of the Boca Raton court case, this was a really unusual decision. There have been 4 federal lawsuits, and all of them ended up upholding conversion therapy laws that have been passed in other states. The decision in Boca Raton was an outlier, and currently they're waiting for a rehearing, the entire 11th Circuit. The opinion was 2-1 of the 11th Circuit Court, which ruled that the local ban on conversion therapy was unconstitutional. And the 2 judges that said it was unconstitutional are recent Trump-appointed judges who don't have a lot of judicial experience, honestly. If you look into who these judges are, you kind of understand why it is that they're going to have a rehearing on that. The dissenting opinion in that case got the law right, and they affirmed that local governments have the authority to protect youth from the harms of conversion therapy. As the dissent noted, the majority opinion ignores the mountain of rigorous evidence that shows that conversion therapy is harmful, that it leads to bad outcomes for patients, and simply that it doesn't work. And that's what I would also say about claims that, well, what if people voluntarily want to do this? Who are we to stand in their way if they voluntarily want to consent to get conversion therapy? Well, first of all, this bill would only affect minors. And so if we pass this in Nebraska, it will just say that if you are a kid, no conversion therapy for you. Once you're 19, you can consent to receive conversion therapy. But regardless of age, this is a practice that is pseudoscientific, that's ineffective and harmful, and it's ineffective and harmful regardless of whether or not it's something somebody wants. If a treatment doesn't work, if a treatment causes harm, it doesn't really matter if they really want it. And in some ways it makes it even more dangerous, because when they seek the treatment that is ineffective and harmful and it inevitably doesn't work, these people are going to blame themselves, and they're going to inevitably double down on the self-hatred that caused them to go there in the first place. Also, nothing in this bill prevents gender-affirming personally affirming therapy that helps people who are struggling with their sexual orientation make sense of that. Nothing in this bill says that you can't go to your counselor and say, I've been married for 30 years and I'm starting to have same-sex attractions and I don't know how to process it. Can you help me? I don't want to live that way. I want to stay married. Nothing prevents somebody from working through feelings like that with their counselor or having honest conversations about fears or anxieties or problems around their sexuality. This is a very common thing for counselors to talk about with people. All this bill says is that you cannot try to change somebody's sexual orientation. And that, if that happens and someone makes a complaint against someone holding one of these licenses in Nebraska, that would go to court and they would have to prove that that's what they were doing. And the bill is very clear about what conversion therapy is and isn't. And so we can decide in the legislature what it is, and that would be for the courts to work out if there's ever a complaint brought against somebody. What else did I write here? I would also just note for the record that there are men and women, but there are also medically intersex people. Between 1% and 2% of the population is intersex, and what that means is that they have chromosomes that are not XX or XY. They might be XYY or XXY, and odds are there are intersex people who work in this building statistically, and a lot of times these people you cannot tell from looking at them, but they have other conditions that they live with or things that they work through medically because of the chromosomal abnormality. So that's certainly something that exists in nature in 1% to 2% of people in the population. It costs nothing to say that my God loves you, I don't hate gay people, I don't want any harm to them, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to say that stuff unless there's a vote behind it. And what we need to be hearing is not just words of faith and words, but we need to see faith through action. And if you say, my God loves you, I don't hate gay people, we have an opportunity here to use a vote to make that point instead of just using words to say that. There are plenty of things in this world, speaking from personal experience, to make a gay person hate themselves, to make a gay person feel like they're not welcome, that they're never going to be accepted, that they're never going to meet somebody and fall in love, that they're never going to have the normal adult experiences of getting your heart broken or falling in love or having a baby or a family. There's enough forces in this world working to confirm that for LGBTQ people every day. And conversion therapy is one more thing that adds to the stress and anxiety and pressure that we feel all the time, that there's something wrong with us, that we're not enough, that we are a condition, an illness that needs to be treated and cured. And Nebraska has a responsibility at least to protect children from the consequences of these attitudes. This bill is similar to many other laws that we have that protect children from dangers. For instance, state law protects young people from child abuse and neglect at the hands of their parents and other adults. We don't let kids buy alcohol and tobacco. We say they have to wear seat belts. We protect them from verbal harassment and discrimination at school. And children in Nebraska have the same right to expect that a therapist practicing with a license from the state of Nebraska is not going to put them at risk of severe harm, is not going to put them at risk of depression and substance abuse. Research from the Family Acceptance Project showed that 63% of people who went through conversion therapy experienced a suicide attempt. That is a remarkable correlation between people who go through conversion therapy. 63%, way more than half, end up experiencing a suicide attempt. This legislation is very carefully and narrowly drafted to define what this practice is. And I think it's in good shape. This is one that I will work, and this is one that I think that we could join some other conservative states in saying this is something that we can all agree on that we need to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. I don't see any follow-up questions. So that will close our hearing on LB 231 and close our hearings for the day. Have a great weekend, everyone.